Hello everyone and welcome back to another AFK journey video. In this video we're going to be making an updated PvP tier list taking into account Supreme League, the performance of heroes, and my overall basically adjusted opinions after that. Now we're going to be leader off with the most important PvP heroes, which are going to be in the S tier. These are either going to be the game changing hyper carries or the game changing utility heroes on your team. So first hero we have here is Sylphira. Sylphira is so good because she silences enemies, deals massive damage, and if you protect her with like an Ulna and even a Hepler on top of that, she also becomes almost impossible to kill. So Sylphira is one of the best hyper carries, and that's why I've led off the S tier with her. Very important PvP hero. Frieren, also very important hyper carry for PvP, one of the top tier picks right now. She not only deals massive damage, she also has the defensive magic, which is huge utility for the team for protecting herself and protecting the frontline tank. And that is a hero. Basically, you can slot Frieren into almost any team to at least get value from that defensive magic. And then you have Gwyneth, who is the third of the three top hyper carries because she is a non-alternate base damage nuker with the normal attack damage, and her damage output is absolutely insane. If you combine her with a gunner and protect her with something like an Alicent or Kulu, she becomes almost unkillable, and also is just bursting enemies seconds into the match, not relying on her ultimate, and that is really good. It counters a lot of meta teams currently, and so Gwyneth, these three are the top hyper carries. Then we have the top utility heroes, which are going to be Ulna to Dunlinger. Ulna, for that invincibility, she still is the #1 utility hero in PvP in my opinion, for that invincibility that she provides. But after that, Contest is a very close second, because Contest, if you have a stall Contest team that just keeps the Contest alive for long enough, whether you pair with an Alicent to protect her, Hepler to protect her, or you just have enough healing on the team with like Celise, if Contest is able to survive long enough, she's going to silence all of the enemies, and that is basically going to be your win from that point on in the match. So Contest is really a game-changing hero, one of the best utility heroes, but she needs a stall team built around her. Gunner, one of the best protectors with his invincibility, and also he has great tankiness, decent damage output as well. He is a great hero for utility for PvP. And then Dunlinger to prevent the ultimates of the opponent. Mainly, like 90% of the time, Dunlinger is being used with the ultimate block because it does counter key hyper carriers like Krynaya, like Sylphira, like even Azalea. And so Dunlinger can shut down a lot of... Oh, and even, of course, Saida. I didn't even mention that. But Dunlinger can shut down a lot of top hyper carries and meta teams. But he cannot shut down the Gwyneth. And that is why Gwyneth is so strong. And then you have Saida, who is, I would consider, the fourth best hyper carry in the game right now. The reason for that is when she gets off 3 ultimates is basically a guaranteed win for your team. And then you just go for a stall strategy to basically give her energy, give her healing, and allow her to get those 3 ultimates off. And that is why I think she's one of the most foolproof hyper carries. She isn't quite on the tier of the other 3, as you guys see here. But she still is good enough for the S tier, in my opinion, right at the bottom of the S tier. Okay, moving on to the A tier. These are also going to be core heroes for PvP, whether they be hyper carries, like a kind of like this tier 2 hyper carries, or whether they be great support options to add into your team comp. So Celise is a hero who can slot in almost any team. She gives her massive healing, eventually shielding and attack buff as well when there's excess healing, and that is really good value for pretty much any team. Twins as well, kind of value for almost any team with the Stellar Bond buff and the energy granting they provide, but also if they can get off an ultimate, that gives you a massive haste buff and a good advantage over the enemy team. So twins are really important support. We have Alicent and Kulu, which I group kind of into that same category. They both are kind of like a range damage carry support. They both synergize with Gwyneth, although they can be used with other range carries like Frieren, like even Krynaya and other heroes we're going to talk about. But they provide, like, Alicent provides an additional life, Kulu provides a range defense buff and the melee protection with the wall, and Alicent also boosts damage of like a hero like Gwyneth, and so they're really good, basically tech utility options for your team, and that is what we have for them. Ravion, Lilymate, Theodore, I'll talk about all of these together. These are all some of the, just like Celise, are the main factions. Celise, Ravion, Lilymate, Theodore, they have so much value. They can be slot into almost any team and get value for that team. Ravion for the big attack buff and unaffected for rearmost allies. Lily May for the ultimate enemy ultimate interruption, which can be game winning, or just for her damage output. Theodore for that energy boosting, which also can be game winning. So these heroes, these three and these are really big main faction, basically utility heroes, which you're definitely going to want to run for PvP. Siren as well, he's a really good PvP, basically artifact blocking denial. And then on top of that, his ultimate can have execution and it can have, crowd control. Siren overall is a hero which can be slotted into multiple teams and just make them more effective. And so, yeah, Siren also very top tier meta PvP hero. Now we have three heroes which are more along the supportive side. Zoria, who is the stall factor for hero like Athalia. Now, the thing is, if Athalia didn't exist, Zoria would not be good. Let's just face it. However, if you want a staller for Athalia, the all-time best staller in the game right now is Zoria. Because Zoria is just never going, she is guaranteed to make the fight last at least 40 seconds. And then you're just hoping your Athalia has enough damage in that time to finish off all the enemies, and Zoria can come down and land the finishing blow, right? That is a strategy behind Zoria, and it still is an effective strategy. It can deal with Gunnar Gwyneth. It has a win potential against some of the top tier meta comps. However, honestly speaking, as time goes on, it is going to be probably less and less likely to actually have the ability of countering comps, because even right now, there are a lot of the top meta PvP teams, they do have the edge over the Zoria Athalia team. They have they're favored to win against it. However, because for Supreme League you need a fifth team, Zoria Athalia doesn't use up any of the other top meta PvP heroes, and it still makes a pretty functional team on its own. That's why there's value. Hepler and Zandrock. So Hepler is a great hero, and he can slot into multiple teams. You guys see him with Sulfura a lot to give the additional life. However, he can be used with Contest. You give Contest an additional life, which also just allows Contest to stall longer and guarantee get off her silence on multiple enemies. You can use Hepler with basically any hero that having an additional life is going to be very game-changing for you. It is mainly Sulfura and Contest. Those are the main two picks, but like you would want it on both of them. If I had two Heplers, I'd be using them on both teams, right? That's how good Hepler is. Zandrock, he has, the Breaking Kulu Central Boulder and map terrain effects, which is powerful. But on top of that, he has haste and movement speed buff, which is really good for melee hypercarry comps, and that's why you see Zandrock locked with Sulfura. But Zandrock also works with Perseus and can also technically work with Bale and other melee hypercarries, basically. Next up, we have Himmel. Himmel also meta because he can support the free run. That is why Himmel is good for PvP. Other than that, generally, you do not want to really be running. Generally speaking, you don't want to be running Himmel without free run. Although it can still be run, he still can get his heroic party buff off onto your team. But really, his major job is to survive 5 seconds and amplify the damage of free run by 60% after that survival. And then free run is just gonna basically destroy the enemy. That is the whole reason you run Himmel, is to amplify free run. Then you have Mihira. Mihira is just another tech hero, basically, for PvP. She does well with Sulfura because it does that crowd control, which stacks up her beats. But she does well to counter other heroes like Citrana, like Bonnie, which basically it interferes with them and causes them to really massively delay them applying their debuff mechanic. And that is a big counter. It's a really big counter, and that is why Mihira should be run in PvP if you have her built. Krynaya is, these are the tier 2 hypercarries. Krynaya, Athalia, Perseus, and then even Baleman. These are all what I consider the tier 2 hypercarries. They're hypercarries, but they're not as good as the tier 1 hypercarries. The reason for that is Krynaya gets shut down by Dunlinger. Krynaya gets shut down by Contest. If Contest survives, and she usually does, because she's not locked up in the frozen domain, then Krynaya can only get 1 cycle of ultimate. She cannot ult after that, because Contest silences the Krynaya. She only gets 1 ultimate off. That is why it's basically a hard counter having Contest against Krynaya, and that is a major reason why Krynaya is now definitely a tier 2 hypercarry. And then also she can if she cannot finish off the enemy, then she's just going to get cleaned up without getting another chance. Athalia is a tier 2 hypercarry because she's good with Zoria, she's good in the stall team. However, for a lot of the top tier meta PvP teams, she doesn't have the damage output to actually deal with them. Like, Hepler protecting Sulfura along with Ulna, or if you have Gunnar protecting Gwyneth, there's a chance, but there's not 100% chance. It's like in some cases 50-50 against Freerin. Athalia doesn't do well. I've tested a lot of Athalia versus Freerin because of Freerin's defensive magic. Basically, she's massively reducing the damage that Athalia can inflict. Because Athalia is just like a one hit wonder. Basically, she hits like over the course of a battle, she hits with her ultimate like 3 to 4 times over even a long drawn out fight with Zarya. And now in those 3 to 4 attacks, those ultimates, she needs to finish off the enemy team or kill multiple enemy units. If it doesn't happen, then you basically end up losing because Zarya can only stall out for so long. So that's why tier 2 hypercarry Perseus. Perseus is even below. Perseus, Baleran, these are even below the status of Kryna and Athalia. I don't want to put them in the B tier. You may need to use them. And Perseus is still good with Xandrock, with other temporary buffers, and even with Lily May, who also benefits from temporary buffers. You can use Perseus, however, he doesn't really stand up to the meta PvP teams. He doesn't really have a win chance against almost any of them, unless he can somehow nuke them before they can do anything. Aurora is a hero which can slot into multiple teams, but honestly not even adding that much. Like, I have tried using Aurora in my teams, but honestly, it's just kind of like you have one leftover slot in your team and you're like, I don't know who to put there. I'm going to put Aurora. That's basically usually what it comes down to. And so she's not actually a hero that necessarily does much for your team, at least as of right now, until summoners become more meta. Baleran is a hero which he can hypercarry. However, he has a lot of issues. You need to ramp him up quickly. You need to ascend him, double ascend him quickly. So you need to like pair him with the Rowan, pair him with other healing Achilles. But if you get up against an enemy team that doesn't have a vitality debuff, but the thing is, Freerin and Grinnet, they have vitality debuff. Sylphira hits hard right out of the gate. And even Cryanaya pops out of the Pandora box and begins bursting you. And so like all of these are actually ways of killing the Baleran before he can even get going. But if you can get your Baleran ascended or double ascended, he can stand up and he can defeat these Athalia teams, the Cryanaya teams, potentially some other teams. But like getting him ascended is a tough part. Potentially when King Roland comes out, I'm watching Baleran because King Roland has massive burst healing. I'm thinking that King Roland is going to have the most synergy with Baleran, then potentially is going to be potentially meta hero. But for right now, yeah, he does definitely have a lot of problems, but he can work if you pull him off. Now, B tier are going to be heroes who are, again, that utility role or some really, like, tier 3 hypercarries, like, as you guys see at the end here, Shamira, Tassi, and stuff. These are the tier 3 hypercarries, or they are the utility heroes or the supports, which don't really actually bring in as much to the table as the A level. But because, of course, you don't have enough of the A and S level to go around, you are going to be using the B tier heroes. It's not like the B tier heroes are bad, but they're not as good as the A tier heroes, in my opinion. So we have Callan. Now, why have I put Callan here? You might be thinking, because the thing with Callan I've noticed is he doesn't reduce true damage, because his damage reduction is on physical and magical damage, and true damage is very prevalent in the meta, whether it be Freerin, whether it be Sylphira, whether it even be Athalia. You're gonna have, and even Person, you have true damage, and then in those cases, the Callan isn't bringing enough to the table with the damage reduction. Now, Callan is still solid because for all other forms of damage, even heroes like Gwyneth, he is going to basically provide your team a bit more of a lifeline, a couple more seconds basically of survival, which could turn the tides of a fight. So I don't think Callan is bad, but I think that he's also, he isn't like a foolproof way of protecting your team. It isn't going to be like a guaranteed, basically, survival for the first 10 seconds. It can into most comps, but not all of them. And then after that initial damage reduction he provides, or whatever, the damage absorption he provides, he's basically useless from that point on in the fight. So it's only about those initial 5 to 10 seconds, and usually the game isn't decided until right after that. But anyway, that's Callan. Pandora is a hero which, for ultimate-based nukers like Cryanaya, like if you're using it with Shamira or other heroes, you will need to use Pandora, or it's the best option to use Pandora, especially for heroes who have no initial energy, like Cryanaya. Like, if you're not using Pandora with Cryanaya, yeah, you're in for a rough time, because she just cannot charge up energy fast enough. But for those cases, Pandora has a use. There are weaknesses of Pandora. She can be killed easily, and if she's killed before the hero comes out of the box, that is detrimental for you. That's basically a game over for you. But if you're able to keep her safe somehow, then, and it lasts for the 4 or 5 seconds, and your hero comes out of the box and begins ultimating, then you can win the game off of that. So That's why Pandora is still an important hero. And then we have Rowan. Rowan also good utility hero. He can boost energy, he can give HP potions, he can boost Balevan's health to send him, he can boost energy of a hero to get an early ultimate off. So Rowan overall solid and decent, but at the same time, not at the tier of the A tier. We have the Eevee. Eevee also can have utility like, healing prolonged throughout the fight, attack buff from her quill that she gives to allies. And then she can also have magic defense shred on the enemy. And if she can get all of her investigation complete, which is asking for a lot, like generally in Supreme League, it's hard to pull that off. But if it does happen, then also comes damage reduction onto the enemy team. So Eevee definitely has a utility role and she's nice to have in a team. But again, not at the tier of the A tier, like the heroes which you always basically want to try to use. But Eevee can slot into teams nicely. And because you're going to not have enough heroes just from the S and A tier alone, you are going to be slotting Eevee in definitely. Especially in the more stroller-oriented teams like Zoria, or you can even use her in the buffer role for like hyper carries who are in the rearmost tile. So you have Bonnie. Bonnie is obviously the core part of the Bonnie damage over time archetype. The thing is, though, Bonnie is counterable by Mahira. Bonnie is counterable just by huge damage, killing her early on before anyone can even spread the debuffs. And then so yeah, Bonnie is just in a really awkward place, honestly. I know for players who have no more of the other higher tier heroes built up, they will have to use a Bonnie damage over time team with like Bonnie and Citrana, Nero or not Nero or Damon or something. But these teams are definitely tier 3 teams. They do not, like, if you don't have, like, if you just have, like, Bonnie damage over time with whether it be Igor, whether it be Damon, or even Zoria, they cannot stand up to the top meta teams, or even the tier 2 teams. And so this is the thing. But when you're limited on options, obviously tier 3 is still good. It's still good enough to use. Marcel I put down to tier 3 because I think if you have Marcel, you can make use of her if you're very limited on options. Potentially, you could consider an A tier hyper carry. However, she has multiple problems. Number one, she has bad survival of her own. Number two, she is ultimate based. Without her ultimate, her damage is not there. It's not enough to actually nuke as hard as other heroes can. And if you're going to be using an Ulna on her or a Gunner on her, it's not a good decision. You need to be using these heroes on the more impactful hyper carries. Now, it can work, just like, Ulna can work on Shmira, it can also work on Marcel. However, you are allocating a lot of resources onto not the top tier hyper carry, and you're leaving then your other hyper carries without the best protection, So that is why Marcel is here. And also, like, Marcel is a hero which you can only get from the seasonal store right now, and there's no with the soul stones. There's no point of doing that. You should not be Paragon upgrading Marcel. I've just recently reset my exclusive equipment of Marcel all the way down to +5. I'm not planning to use it ever again in the future of AFK journey. Obviously that is because I have enough of the top tier hyper carries to run teams. But even if you don't, basically you can use Marcel for now, but know that when the next hyper carry comes out, the next meta team you begin building, you're going to begin phasing Marcel out. Rainier is a support which has some utility in PvP, especially if you use him with like an enlightening spell on your hyper carry. Like I've been using that with Freerin, and he also gives ranged attack boost onto the ally behind him. So Rainier has some value. Damon is a hero that has some value for PvP. However, it can be awkward to slot him into teams. It's like he works with the Bonnie damage over time teams, but apart from that, where exactly do you actually want to use him? You can use him as kind of that attack buffer, and a bit of shielding for one of your heroes, but it's not actually going to change that much over the course of the fight. And so Damon is in a very awkward place. You can run him. He's an overall decent PvP hero, but he's not actually providing as much utility as like the A tier utility heroes. Nero is a hero which can block an enemy melee interruption or give another life to one of your major heroes or your carries. There's definitely value there, but the value is not, unfortunately, enough to be A tier, but definitely usable. The B tier is still good, don't get me wrong. The B tier is not bad. The B tier is much more situational, right? It's like the A tier heroes you kind of always want to fit into a team. The B tier heroes are like, if it works out, if the team does need this hero, go ahead and use it, but otherwise no point. Ludovic is a hero that can heal, and that's the value, the burst healing, but the burst healing honestly is not enough. Like damage reduction, whether it be from Callan or whether it be now from Peggy coming out, these are the more preferred basically forms of protection. The burst healing can be countered by vitality debuff, and it can also be countered just by nuking the enemy before the healing has a chance to operate, right? But the damage reduction, which is their the shielding or whatever, even from like a gunner shielding, yeah, for all the allies behind him, or range defense buff of Kulu. These are things which are actually preempting the damage nuke, whereas Ludovic is after the fact, and the hero may already be dead by then. Hugin, just for some buff value and like a Lightbearer team, he's an overall decent PvP hero, but not. He isn't bringing enough to the table to be considered one of the top tier hero utility heroes. You have Igor for the Bonnie damage over time stall. Igor is decent for that. If Igor is able to survive, he can do really well in the Bonnie damage over time team. However, if the enemy has a lot of hardcore damage, whether it be Frieren, Gwyneth, Sulfura, obviously Saida also going to destroy this. Cryonaya, maybe, I don't know about, probably Azalea too, but even Cryonaya, like all of these are going to be destroying these Igor damage over time teams because Igor's just going to get killed. Zoria at least doesn't get targetable, so she's gonna guarantee the fight go on a certain duration. Igor, if you are able to have him survive, he's better than Zoria, but the thing is, realistically, you can't make him survive. He's not gonna survive against the top PvP heroes. So that's the thing. Pang, just for some more tankiness with his shielding and unaffected and attack buff that he provides. That's the main reason to be using him. And it can be decent utility for a team. Zany for her towers, to just deal some damage and also provide some tankiness. Just a bit of utility for a team. Then you have Laika, of course, for her temporary buffs, and she can be used with Perseus. She can be used with Lily May. She can be used with even Marcel and things, because she has an energy boost as well for heroes which need to get an ultimate off early. So this is decent for that, but not exactly I would consider an A tier. Gerda also kind of good utility with her healing. That spring, the hot spring will remain on the battlefield for the whole duration of the fight. So even after Gerda dies, that hot spring is there, and that's some value. Like, you know, that other heroes usually only have value when they're alive. Gerda has a value after dying, and that can be really good. It can swing the tides of fight to an extent. However, honestly, it usually is not impactful enough, that spring. Then you have Citrana for the Bonnie damage of time team. We kind of discussed it when we talked about Bonnie. Counterable by Mihura, and also lacks the damage to actually deal with the top meta teams. However, for limited options, it can be used. Now, Shamira, Sylvan, I'm going to talk about all of these together. Shamira, Sylvan, Tasi, Galahad, these are all tier 3 hyper carries because they all have fundamental flaws. You have Shamira, first of all of them are ultimate based damage dealers. That's already a flaw, right? And that is why we've moved Cryonaya down to A. Sophia is also an ultimate based damage dealer, but she has huge value with her silence. So that's why it's on a different tier. But like Cryonaya is an ultimate based damage dealer. That's why she's tier 2. And B, these are all ultimate based damage dealers. That's the number 1 problem. Number 2 problem, they're slow. They don't begin as soon as you cast your ultimate. It's not, okay, GG, we win. No, you need to still survive another 5 to 10 seconds for all the damage to come off and actually then finish off enemy team. That's basically what's happening here. And then number 3, they lack the damage. Their damage is not as good as the other higher tier hyper carries. And so this is why these are heroes which are kind of like, you use them when you have nothing better to use, and these are the heroes you have invested. But like, I mean, Sylvan can work in the same team formation as like a Gwyneth, just swapping Gwyneth for Sylvan. However, of course, Gwyneth is far better because she's not ultimate based. She has more damage, output damage per second compared to a Sylvan. And so in both of those ways, is basically made Sylvan redundant. But if you don't have Gwyneth, you can use Sylvan in place of Gwyneth. If you don't have, for example, an ultimate based nuker like Frieren or Cryna or anything like that, you can use Shamir, Tasi, or Galahad even in place of that. But it's just not going to be as effective. And really, these heroes are not, if you're really trying to hardcore, try hard in PvP, these are not the heroes you really want to be using. But if you have nothing better, you can use them. Okay, finally we have the C tier. C tier is not necessarily, again, terrible heroes, but they're just much more situational or very niche. They're just not going to be heroes that generally you're going to fit into your comps. So Shadewing can work in Bonnie damage over time teams, but that's basically it. And is he bringing enough to the table? It just depends on how much continuous damage you're outputting, right? Talia is a hero which she can tank well if the enemy doesn't have true damage, but if the enemy has true damage, she does get blown up. Now, a lot of people were using like free Rin with Talaya because free Rin can give Talaya that defensive magic and allow Talaya to tank better. It can be, and it's a pretty decent strategy. Or if you have burst healing with Talaya to heal her up rapidly after she converts a lot of health into shielding, that's also a viable strategy. So definitely you can make Talaya work, and that's why I put them in the C tier. I haven't just not included them at all. It means you can make them work, but is it really worth making them work? That is a question you have to ask yourself. Shakira can be work with like Theodore boosting Shakira for an immediate ultimate that can give some win potential. Lorison just for damage boosting and healing that he does provide with his chains. However, I do think there are fundamental issues with him. Really, he has to be alive to respawn the chains. The chains take some time. There's a cast time in between each chain. And even at the beginning of the fight, there's a cast time before the initial chain even locks on. It's not like an instant effect. It's like, so just like Bonnie debuff takes some delay. It's kind of the same with Lorison. Thorin is a hero which, honestly, he is just not very good. He's just a basically standard tank. That's all he does. And he's only protecting one of your allies. Really, you only use Thorin if you have nothing better to use. You have Damien, he is like support, but like it's awkward because he is a bit of a delay before he begins supporting. Then it's also in like a kind of confined range, it's not map wide. And then he has healing, he has haste buff, he has some crowd control into the enemy one unit. And some blinds eventually, but yeah, Damon usually is not impactful enough to run on a team, and that's why I put him in C tier. Iron Almas, so Iron Almas are heroes which, again, you don't really want to use unless you have no other option. But that being said, Almas can function as a tank. He is still a tank, just like Thorin, just kind of default standard tank. And if you use him with Iron, it can, have a little bit more value of that crowd control. However, Iron really, because of unaffected heroes, and also the fact is, Iron's immobilization is not hard CC, hard crowd control. It's soft crowd control. It immobilizes enemies, but all that means is they're not able to move. They're still able to use skills. They're still able to use normal attacks. And so, like, if you have a ranged enemy team and Iron's immobilizing them, it's basically not doing anything. Even if they're not unaffected. And so this is the thing about Iron. You usually just use him as Lily May bait for now. And then you have Pheromore, who is just a hero a lot of people do have built. You can use him as an attack buffer for PvP. If he gets off an ultimate, he can have some kill potential. However, honestly speaking, just not good enough. Just using him for that sole attack buff onto one target is not recommended unless you have nothing better to use. In which case you can, definitely. And realistically, in a fight, he usually doesn't get off his ultimate. He's usually dead before then. So anyway, guys, that is my updated PvP tier list. Hopefully, it is helpful and gives you some idea on what to prioritize in your PvP development. Of course, this is my opinion, so there is going to be subjectiveness to it. However, I currently, in my head right now, I do agree with the positioning of these heroes. This is my current honest opinion, genuine opinion, and this is what I can recommend. We did talk about each hero in detail, so you guys can watch this full video and actually, if you're looking for any specific hero, we do discuss them in full detail to do them justice and to explain my reasoning. But yeah, this is my overall opinion. The two heroes which are coming out are Lamentis and Peggy. Out of them, I do think that Lamentis is going to be this tier 2 hypercarry along with the Thalia and Cryonia. I do not think he's going to be a tier 1 hypercarry, but we will have to wait and see about that. And because of his, basically, the survival of his apostles is core. If he cannot have his apostles survive, he's basically useless. So that is asking for too much, right? But we'll have to see if there's a consistent way to make his apostles survive against even the top meta teams, then that's great. But like Gwyneth is going to have fun against enemy Lamentis. She's just going to be blowing them up. Even if they have a Dunlinger, she's just going to be blowing them up with the normal attack damage, blowing up those apostles and being like, where are your growth stacks now? So this is why I'm really reluctant about Lamentis. And then we have the Peggy. Peggy is a hero I'm much more excited for. I think that Peggy is going to be an A tier, a utility hero, because of she can be slotted into multiple teams. It's not just, it's not just the summoner meta. And so I'm much more excited about Peggy than Lamentis. When you're talking from a PvP angle, I think that Peggy is going to be A tier utility support, and Lamentis will probably be towards the end of A tier, like maybe around Persis or Baelorn. But we'll have to see. That's my just intuition right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. That's always interesting to hear about. And if you guys are thinking about making a purchase in AFK Journey, please use my affiliate link for the official Farlight store. This is the best way you can support me and also gain 5% bonus dragon crystals on your purchase. My affiliate link is in the description of this video in a pinned comment, and you can actually bookmark this link in your browser, and whenever you're planning to make a purchase, just return to the bookmark link and make your purchase. It will support me and be greatly appreciated. So thanks for watching. I'll hopefully see you in the next video, and until then, everyone, peace out for now.